someone who's gonna be facilitating this whole session. And before I do that, I have an announcement for the year is, our teachers. Can you please stay behind after creative expressions? And that would be at 10. We have something special for you that we would want to give you, so it's important that you are here. Are we good? Now, do it like you want to do it. Give a round of applause to Luna August.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Did you eat liquor? You all look so amazing. The turnout here is also amazing. I didn't expect to meet so many people within such a short space of time, so I'm blessed, I'm humbled, and all of those things that people say. But it's really empowering to see so many of you and to meet all of you, basically, well, most of you are meeting for the first time. During the previous session, as some of you were sharing your stories with us, I was reminded of a conversation that I had with one of the candidate fellows earlier. And I was actually questioning the limitations of online learning. And I remember telling them that face-to-face engagements or engagements where we are required to be physically present can sometimes be very, very taxing. And it's difficult to sometimes show up. And we are often defeated by everything that happens around us, and we know that there's a lot happening in the world. But I'd like us to express some appreciation and gratitude to ourselves with some finger snaps or a round of applause for simply showing up. As I was introduced, my name is Luna August. Sorry, Matabo, but I'm also in Year D doing my PGCE at UCT. And as you heard, I am your MC for the TED Style Talks tonight. We've congregated here tonight to hear what some of our peers, pre-service teachers, our future colleagues, our current colleagues, our peers are ideating on and practicing to solve some of the most pressing issues or matters that are currently facing basic education and perhaps education more broadly. And to those of you who know me closely and who interact with me regularly, you'd know that I'm on a strong path towards centering education around giving the student the best experience possible. And you'd also know that my drive and stimulus is around making sure that I don't perpetuate what is currently wrong with teaching. And also with what is currently crutching our education sector. And most importantly, not to replicate the kind of learning environment that I was subjected to. And the student experience that I'm referring to is one that is inclusive. It's one that embraces the diversity that comes with having a multiplicity of people with vast life experience that sit in your classroom space. And the student experience that I'm speaking of and trying to build also asks for students to have a seat at the table when their learning experiences are being designed, when decisions that directly affect their lives are being made, and asking students what they want their learning experiences to be like. It's not a secret that many of our teacher counterparts resist change. And they resist change for many reasons. And we can discourse about it one day. If you see me in the hallways, feel free to grab me for a chat on that. But tonight there are a strong group of people sitting here who are future teachers. Some are currently teaching. And I'm confident that they are busy ushering in strong, loud, and echoing change. What's great is also that we are empowered by the JGF Fellowship to make an impact through being expert teachers, through disrupting education by practicing leadership, and also by identifying entrepreneurial initiatives in the sector. And my call to each of you sitting here is to intensify the impact that you want to make and to use the platforms available to you to do so. Because the issues that are facing schooling is unfortunately getting worse by the day. And as a community, we need each other so that we don't drown once we enter the profession. So this brings me to that Google form that I circulated. And I've curated some questions which you've responded to. And this was just so that I could get a sense of what your expectations are. And very interestingly, when asked what interests you the most about this session specifically, 47% of you indicated that you are most interested in seeing how other candidate fellows go about their innovative practices. And similarly, about 24% of you are in a stage of actively seeking inspiration about the kind of impact that you want to make. And I was also very excited to see that 55% of you currently have an idea that's ruminating somewhere in the back of your mind that basically just needs empowering. And sitting in this room tonight, we have ideas that vary from creating safe spaces for LGBTQIA+ students and teachers. We have people who are very passionate about connecting the special needs classroom with mainstream education. Also promoting the arts, or the integration of the arts into the education model. And, exactly. And also gamifying teaching and learning experiences in maths and science. Those ideas that are currently sitting in the room, these are all the ideas that are currently sitting in the room tonight. And you may not be on stage to share your ideas with us, but in our engagements outside of this space, I encourage you to advocate for the purpose that drives you, and empowerment comes through speaking. You may have experienced a situation where you didn't know a way forward, but simply connecting with someone and speaking about that has afterwards you see that there's untapped potential and you possibly have a lot of ways forward. So I encourage all of you, I'm going to say it one more time, there's power in this room. And I saw one of the survey responses said, and I quote, "Faith comes by hearing. Therefore, hearing other people's experiences drives the belief that one can achieve great things." Exactly. Before we kick off tonight's talks, I would like all of us as a community, both here in the venue and those who are connecting, to give a hearty token of appreciation and gratitude to Munaka for all of the assistance that they've provided with coordinating this session. And then lastly, some light housekeeping. Standing on stage, especially in an audience, in front of an audience as huge as this, might be a little jolting. So if possible, would we be able to, possibly limit distracting the speakers? I politely ask the audience to please limit moving in and out of the venue, and where possible, if possible, to do this while we transition between speakers. Do we all agree to this? Yes. Awesome. Cool. Let's start with the evening's proceedings then. Our first speaker gets us thinking about resource allocation in South African schools and the shortage of expert teachers to facilitate impactful learning experiences for students who have special educational needs. Delivering a talk called Challenge the Comfort, Connect the Change. Let's welcome to the stage and to the floor, Jenna Lee Evers.
Much. There we go. Good evening, everybody. And hi to my biggest supporters. I love you guys. 2 years ago, my baby sister was 10 years old. We started to notice that every single morning before she would go to school, she would break down in tears, crying hysterically. And one day we asked her why, and she said that she felt very overwhelmed just being there. So we made the decision to get her a child psychologist. And unfortunately, the doctor said the dreaded words, "I think we need to do a few tests." 1 year and many, many, many tests later, we got her results, and I turned out to be the one crying hysterically. We heard the words, "Mrs. Evers, your child, unfortunately, has high-functioning autism." Now, this in itself was a huge struggle, it was a huge obstacle for us as a family to overcome. We had to adapt, but adapt we did. And it was through this adaptation that we realized a few big issues. Now, her school, as modernized as they claim to be, they clearly didn't have enough resources or skills to help support and really encourage a child with special needs. And so we tried for ages and ages to get her into the school that she deserves. But unfortunately, we were met with a 2-year-long waiting list. And for every single school, and the only other option was a school with school fees that was so expensive, we'd have to sell our car. Now, what does this teach us? It teaches us that the government allocated resources to the education sector simply isn't sufficient enough to support those kids who really, really need it. So today, I plan on educating our future educators. I plan on enlightening you. I plan on opening your eyes to this big struggle and helping you, give you some tips to start the change. Now, her school assured us, that she would be well managed, she would be well supported. They would give her a little bit less work, they'd help her with her homework, they'd give her more support. But by the end of the year, she would still be drowning, head underwater in schoolwork. We couldn't keep her there. Now, I assure you, this was an excellent school, one of the best schools I've seen. But unfortunately, they weren't expert enough, they weren't advanced enough as society needs them to be. Now, let me throw some facts at you. Now, I know facts can seem a little bit boring, but hang in there. To date, South Africa has 464 special needs schools. They also have approximately 700 fully inclusive schools. Now, yes, this may seem like very, very big numbers, and it may seem very impressive, but what do you think when I tell you that approximately South Africa has over 30,000 schools? That means that 38% of them actually cater to children with special needs. And approximately there's more than 44,000 children with special needs, learning disabilities, neurodivergency in South Africa. Imagine how many of them are actually being helped. Now, if the numbers can't speak to you, let me. It is simply not enough. It is simply not enough to help our children who are craving education. 2-year-long waiting lists is simply not enough. School fees as high as the average income one South African makes annually is not enough. What can we do? What can we do? What should happen? To solve this issue, I don't think that we as a society should be praying on our knees, begging for more resources from the government, because you know how corrupt we as a society are. Do you really think that's going to happen? No. Instead, for example, we have the Vision 2030 speech that all year A's have to do tomorrow. And I realized that what I want to do in the year 2030 is create more innovative workshops and courses for teachers doing their PGCEs, teachers in mainstream schools, so that they be equipped with the necessary skills to help those kids in need, so that they don't have to sit in those waiting lists, so they don't have to be craving that education. But until then, let me give you some tips. Here at JGF, we believe and we strive to be something called an expert teacher. But one cannot be a true expert teacher if one cannot cater to all. You cannot be an expert teacher if you cannot teach all, if you cannot help all. My question to you is, how can you be the expert teacher that these children so desperately need? Let me give you some tips. An expert teacher should be supportive. They need to be the ear that these children need, the eye that can see them, the shoulder for them to cry on when they don't have support at home. Expert teachers need to be encouraging. We need to encourage them to follow their passions. We need to encourage them to pursue whatever talent they choose to pursue. An expert teacher needs to be understanding. Most neurodivergent, autistic kids really struggle to learn in an environment where everything is very overwhelming. And most of these kids, especially kids with mental health issues, thrive in one sector of their skills and lack in another sector. Now, I need you to be understanding as the future expert teachers, as the backbone of our schools. Understand that a child can't sit 24/7 in a classroom all day staring at a whiteboard. Understand that a child can't be forced to stand there in the front of the class, in front of about, 200 people, staring, so scared to give their idol. Understand that you don't need to yank a book out of a child's hand just because they want to read during a break and forcing them to go play. That understanding teacher. So, if there's anything I pray and beg of you to take away from me today, is this. An expert teacher cannot be an expert teacher, a true expert teacher, if they cannot teach all. I encourage you, ladies, gentlemen, non-binary friends, I encourage you. Don't teach the few, teach the many. I challenge you to challenge yourselves. I challenge you to learn about what these kids need. I challenge you to help me solve this huge issue. I challenge you to help me solve the fact that so many mainstream schools can't cater to these struggling individuals. I challenge you to help me make it so that no child has to wait 2 years just for an interview. I challenge you, ladies and gentlemen, non-binary friends, I challenge you. Challenge yourself. Don't teach the few, teach the many, because then and only then can you be a true expert teacher. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yo, wasn't that amazing? Yo, you heard it from Jenna. Be the ear, be the eye, be the shoulder, be the body. Awesome. On to our next speaker. Here to get us thinking around how to facilitate connections in a talk entitled How to Connect the Disconnected, Curing Competition with Collaboration. Let's welcome onto stage Tina Manyaneso.
As a former teacher's pet and future teacher, I'm here to give you a reflection. I'm sure that some, if not most of us here, have been teacher's pets. The tips, the tricks, and the treatment often feel great in the present. But at an education summit that prompts us to make important connections, how do we reconcile the disconnect of what it took for us to be expert teachers, or to be teachers' pets, rather? But we can reflect on all the joys that come with being a teacher's pet. The preferential treatment, getting extensions on due dates. But what I really want us to do is to consider the sorrows that it caused the other students that were not? How do we use that experience to create better learning environments? It takes recognizing that sometimes education can benefit one group of students at the cost of harming others. But how can something this influential to our futures, so much so that we make it a basic human right, have such a high risk of failure? The importance of education goes without saying. That is why we can't risk individuals feeling like they can't succeed in that space. So I imagine that there are so many children who feel like they cannot participate in education the moment they don't believe they could be the favorite. Students are unable to find meaning or even want to learn beyond the teacher, the classroom, and the experiences that they share with other students. That's why I think that we need to caution ourselves from contributing to the cycles that make and enlarge those disconnects. I believe that learning is something that every student wants to do. They're associated with their ability, their sense of belonging, and their capability. So sometimes students walk into the classroom and they see it as an intensely competitive space, a place that is for those who can, that excludes those who cannot. That makes learning an intimidating activity. In this talk, I intend to address the issue of teachers having favorites and how that contributes to a further disconnect that leads to failure. If we say that the quality of education cannot outperform the quality of its teachers, then we can take it a step further and say that the quality of the connections that we have to our students cannot outperform the quality of the contributions that they will make to a classroom space. An ideal teacher walks into the classroom and allows students to be confident in making contributions to the learning space. Unfortunately, in reality, the ideal teacher is scarce. Students, as a result, associate learning with fear or just being uncomfortable in that space because they don't think they can live up to being the favorite. There's a certain group of individuals who've already made it to the top of that academic ladder, and they don't think that they could ever fit into that space. And that just leads to a lack of confidence in their own thinking. So as aspiring teachers and current educators, we should see our students as individuals who all have the potential to excel in the subjects that we teach. The perception should not be between strong learners and weak learners. Instead, we should be proactive and attentive in creating a learning environment that motivates them to be better, but also that accommodates all of them. But to really dismantle any perception that allows for any sort of segregation in a classroom, we need to empower a sense of community, one that allows teaching to integrate 21st century competencies such as collaboration. That way, students can contribute to a learning space and see that they're valuable in the classroom and in society. Teaching should be about creating an environment and the kind of community that you want to live in outside of the classroom. That is why we need to create a more collaborative culture that cures the competitive one. This is important because the teacher-student disconnect doesn't happen all at once, or even intentionally. Because as aspiring teachers, we all sit here and we think about creating learning spaces that are really inclusive. But over time, when the realities of teaching hit, there's this natural gravitation to the top of a classroom, and at that point, we fall into the trap of favoritism and shutting other students down. A teacher-student connection is the most fundamental connection that should exist. It ultimately determines a student's success. Because after all, education is not a race to be seen. We shouldn't create the perception that it is in a classroom space. Education is about developing the skills that children will need to actively apply that knowledge and those skills in the real world. We lower the risk of losing students when we make it our mission to emphasize collaboration in the classroom and not a competitive culture. Because no matter the kind of classroom you're going to teach or the students that you're going to face, you have an obligation to all your students and not one, not a favorite. Educators have the power to dismantle the disconnects, the problems and the issues that make teaching difficult. And we do this by creating an educational space that wholeheartedly welcomes students into the classroom to contribute without having to compete for their value. I leave you with a quote from John Dewey, an educational reformer. And he said, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina, from one teacher's pet to another. We've heard it. Let's do our best to not perpetuate the disconnect. Let's dismantle the hierarchy, or rather, sorry, the meritocracy. That's the word I'm looking for. And yeah, let's dismantle the meritocracy and let's build and encourage competencies of the 21st century. Awesome. We are shifting gears slightly towards the creative realm. Here to speak to us about creatively connecting in the classroom, let's welcome onto the stage Ashika Regal.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashika Regal, and for the next few minutes as I do my talk, I would like to connect with you all. Starting with this. Yes, it is a blank screen, because I invite you all to close your eyes for a moment. I know we're all sick of the darkness and load shedding, but bear with me. Please close your eyes for a moment. Imagine your past self, back in high school as a student. It's been a long, draining day, and you're on the verge of sleeping. Imagine you're in the class of your least favorite teacher. They are so boring, repeating the same teaching style, and they practically do the lesson as if they are robots. The students have to eat up the information as if they are textbooks. Now, I ask you this question. What would you have wished your teacher had done for you to make the lesson less boring? Open your eyes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, I wish they would have done more fun activities, that they would be enthusiastic, or less strict. Wouldn't hurt to crack a joke once in a while. Sound familiar? Well, yes, you want your teacher to be more entertaining, but ultimately you want them to have feeling. Now, what do I mean by feeling? I refer to that raw passion, the interest in one's imagination, which I believe is the key to helping struggling students succeed. The talk that I have for you is centered around connecting the teacher to the student through the theme of creativity. Creativity is the use of imagination to create something. It's about inventing different ways of confronting issues effectively. According to studies done by Angela Lee Duckworth, the main characteristic that was a predictor of success is grit. And that is the passion and perseverance to achieve a goal. And I believe these can be influenced significantly by how creative we allow ourselves and our students to be in the classroom. And I'll tell you why I believe this through two experiences of mine. And that is being an evaluations coordinator and finishing a TEFL course. During my time as an evaluations coordinator for Shortco, we did the Read Today, Lead Tomorrow project. And this was basically about teaching students a love for reading. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this project, we were just like that boring teacher that you imagined when closing your eyes. The students did not have a fun time, and it's working. Yeah. The students ultimately sat on the seats, they lifted their hands occasionally, read on their own, but they felt as if they were in the typical classroom setting. And they did not have a passion for reading, and ultimately, many of them dropped out. So we decided to try something different. We added fun activities like songs imagined by John Lennon or the Sorting Hat song. We added drawings, role plays in groups, and games that connected characters to locations. And because of these creative activities, more students wanted to join the project because of that passionate feeling they got while learning the stories. Additionally, more students were eager to take out books from the donation drive that we initiated for them. Isn't that amazing? And another thing about these activities is that it allowed us to use our creative skills. Remember that game I mentioned about characters to locations, connecting them? The same tools I use for digital art, I used to create this. But don't get me wrong, you don't have to be an artist to do creative activities in the classroom. If you have an interest in theater, TikTok tutorials, or memes. So it really depends on you. But don't forget to focus on your students' interests, because that's how you make a connection with them, to get them, to make them think that they have something relevant to them. Because the more interest we have in something, the more dedicated we will finish whatever we want to do, such as binge watching a Netflix series until you reach the end of the season. Because you're interested about it, you're more determined to finish it. And this leads me to my second reason why I believe creativity works. TEFL stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language, and many people need this to secure a job teaching English overseas. But what I found interesting about TEFL is how they use studies from all over the world of lesson plans to find out what works best to help students learn something foreign to them. And the main thing that I want you to focus on is the VAC approach. Because a lot of your learners will not have the same learning preferences. And as an expert teacher, as a wise woman once said, you need to cater to all your students, right? Before I get onto this, when I say VAC, I want you to remember Jack Black. Who of you here have watched The School of Rock? Yes, that's great. For those of you who don't know, it's about a musician who pretends to be a teacher. And what he did is he used a variety of his students' skills and recruited them to create a successful musical performance. Now, what if we applied this to the classroom? What if we had a variety of creative activities that are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, and we applied to the classroom to create a successful learning environment? But don't take that from me, because according to TEFL, if we have a variety of these entertaining activities, then your students will be more comfortable, productive, and successful. For your visual learners, you can have drawings such as Pictionary. For your auditory learners, they wouldn't mind a song or a movie clip. And for those on the more active side, a role play or even a dance like that scene from Hannah Montana in which Miley Cyrus used the power of dance to memorize the parts of the body. And this is all on you and who you are as a teacher. These are all merely examples. And another thing I want to mention about Jack Black is not only did he have a variety of his students' skills, but he also had a connection with them. He had a relationship with his students, and he celebrated the potential of his students' musical preferences. It would make all the difference if we did the same. If we had a connection and relationship with our students and celebrated the potential in their learning preferences. Now, imagine your present self in the classroom as a teacher. It's been a long, draining day, but the students are glad that they at least have your interest in class. Imagine a school that thrives because you give them that feeling. Connect with your students through creativity in the classroom to make your students more passionate and persevering to succeed. And if there's one thing I want you all to take from this talk, is sometimes all it takes is a little bit of imagination. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I was just tasked with two very heavy announcements. So the first announcement, when this session is done, as in when we are done with the connected session, all those involved with the creative expressions session, there's a humble request to please meet in this venue while the rest of us go on break. And the second announcement is, if you haven't already done so, or if you've been doing so, please continue doing so on your social media platforms. Please post and use the hashtag #ConnectedSummit. Awesome. So, thank you so much, Ashika, for your insights around creativity as creativity as it's also a 21st century competency and how it stimulates engagement in the classroom. Really, really appreciated it as a follower of the universal design for learning. Our next speaker is getting us thinking around spatial politics of schooling. Let's welcome onto the stage Iviwe Mtubu, and his talk is entitled Connecting Place, Pupils, and Pedagogy.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, so connecting place, pupils, and pedagogy. Now, I want us to look at this from the state of our education. Now, the state of South Africa's education requires much reflection and magnification. Now, what do I mean by state of education? What I'm trying to tell you here, at least when we look at the word state, I want us to understand state as the particular condition that someone or something is in at a specific time. Now, I speak about time. I want us to understand this element of time as context, right? Which is the intersection of time and place, or rather space, time and space. Now, I'm definitely not from NASA, right? So, which space am I talking about? I'm talking about, the physical space, the physical geographic space. Now, one thing about me is that I am a geography teacher, so I'm talking about the physical geographic space. Now, this space is an intersection between location and place. Now, I want us to understand that these two are distinctly different. Now, location is a point in space with specific spatial relationships. For example, the school on Main Road, right? Relation to the road. Next to Pick and Pay, relation to Pick and Pay. Your address is in relation to the road, or whatever house number. We're together? So that's location. Now, place, or at least a sense of place. I want you to understand that place, or a sense of place, refers to subjective feelings evoked by a place for both insiders. Now, insiders would be people with a sense of belonging, those who live there, those with a sense of ownership of a particular place, and outsiders, visitors, or people that imagine that place. Now, when we look at this, why am I telling you all this? Now, firstly, I don't think I mentioned my name. I am Iviwe, and I have a EGS, or Environmental and Geographical Science degree from UCT, doing my postgrad there. Yeah. Yes. So, I am telling you this because I at least hope that gives you a bit of confidence, right, in what I have to say, that at least I do understand this element of geographic space. Now, South Africa, right, has a broken system. But before we go to the broken system, I need you to understand places as ways of seeing and framing who and what is said to belong where. That's very important. Now, spaces or places are intentional and they are experiential. They send a message. They have specific intentions. Now, in 2013, the government enacted minimum norms and standards for educational facilities, physical buildings, right? This required the government to ensure that all schools have access to sanitation and electricity by November 2016. Now, according to the government's own statistics, they have failed to do this. Now, this report wanted the government to replace pit latrines, inappropriate building materials such as asbestos. We all know the dangers around those, right? And yet, our government still failed to do this. Now, oddly enough, in the Eastern Cape alone, there were 436 mud schools in 2018, and they increased to 582 in 2021. Now, this is post-apartheid. Very important. Increasing of mud schools post-apartheid. Now, Amnesty International's research in Gauteng and the Eastern Cape found numerous examples of schools with poor infrastructure and lacking basic facilities, as government continues, again, to fall short of their promises. Now, buildings that were never renovated, buildings that dated back to the apartheid and even colonial eras, buildings that contained these hazardous materials. Now, where do we think are South Africa's poorest performing schools? They are not only in the Eastern Cape, they are in township and rural areas. Now, those areas are the areas I want us to focus on today. They're in township and rural areas. Now, 28 years after South Africa's democratic transition, its most underserved communities continue to be denied access to decent education, because decent education takes place in decent settings. Now, equality, again, my people, I think, has failed our people. Now, if they continue to learn in settings that reflect their deplorable poverty. Now, we owe South African learners, colleagues, our beneficiaries, a system that reflects their potential and one that maximizes their academic capabilities. we need to realize that architecture is intentional. It says something to the pupil. It reflects something to them. There's a sense of value attached to architecture. So what do we think if this is a school? What message are we sending to our learners? Now, I do believe that it is possible. What am I proposing? I'm proposing a shift from what the government has called an equitable education to a more justice-driven education. One that recognizes the need for redress and actively works towards dismantling apartheid's legacies and colonial legacies, of course. Now, this can be seen even if on a minor scale, from schools such as Cosset in Khayelitsha, a school that recently got awarded for being top quintile 3 school and got great marks for maths and physics. Now, it's not really about the school, but it's about the setting of the school. This school has came out as Khayelitsha's flagship school in recent years. Now, this school was built in 1999, and at some point was the only township school to offer AP mathematics to its learners. Now, gosh, I couldn't get a great picture, but I want you to look at the building. That building doesn't look like a building you'd expect in Khayelitsha. Our second, so that's our township case study. Our second one is Nyanga High School in the Eastern Cape, which many people talk about. We need to realize that this school is an outlier. It should not be, what other rural schools are mirrored towards. Now, this school was built in 1990, but renovations have taken place in recent years. This school has come out as South Africa's top rural schools in recent years, But again, renovations have taken place in recent years. Now, I tell you, these schools are examples of great township and rural schools. I want you to look at the schools again, and look at these two. This one and that one. Now, do we think that the spatial and architectural intentions of those 4 schools are the same? Do we think that the previous 2 schools should be compared to Cosset and Nyanga, yet they are all expected to perform on an equal footing? My people, we must realize that as educational leaders, we owe South African education and its beneficiaries, our pupils, the space that is most suitable to transform the state of our lives and their world. Thank you.
Can we give you another round of applause? Awesome. We're going to move on to our final speaker before the panelists come on stage. This talk is very cryptically titled, but rightfully so. I think you'll be blown away. The talk is titled The Traveling Connection, and we're welcoming onto stage Year E candidate fellow and current teacher, Sabelo Shela.
Yo. Hi, I'm finally here. Everybody who see me today, they've been like, what's wrong, Sabelo? You don't look okay. And I'm like, yo, so many people will be expecting great things from me today. And even though I'm a teacher, like Teacher Lagazi, people were saying, I've been teaching differently. This is actually my first day of teaching, and I have the worst job because I have to teach to these expert teachers. And this is probably one of the most craziest things I've ever done, because I teach in an online school. So I'm currently teaching at UCT. And I studied at UCT. And before that, I was at Wits University. Okay, so I hope I can work this thing. So how this came about, these mobile connections, I have a niece and she's a 2K, and like all 2Ks, she has this mind of her own, and she was doing matric a few years back, and I kept on asking her, have you done your ID? How are you going to write your matric exams without your ID? And she kept on ignoring me like straight. And then finally she said, I'm not going to Home Affairs. Home Affairs is coming to me. And that's where these mobile connections came about. So I'm gonna pick up where if you were left and start talking to you about toilets. So we have all heard about mobile toilets. And what about these mobile water tanks, mobile clinics, and even mobile police stations? Guys, what do these things have in common? They bring the essential service where it is needed. They go to the people where the people need it. Home Affairs lines are so long, and you have these 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they need to get an ID. And you know, if you need to get to Home Affairs, you have to wake up at 4 a.m. at least. Or you can sleep there if you are really determined about getting your ID. So, what about mobile schools? I'm talking about a micro mobile school on wheels, which can move from one location to another, similar to the mobile clinics and the mobile police stations. But before I get any further, I'm going to provide you with a bit of context. The South African Schools Act of 1996 clearly states that every South African learner should get the exact same facilities and the exact same education, right? But we all know, almost 30 years post-apartheid, that is not the case. My colleagues have said it very well here. It is not the case, right? So, especially in rural areas, there's been very little improvement, both structurally and pedagogically. So, and rural areas have also become marginalized because the South African government has been more focused on the development of urban areas. We want to be an urban nation, but how do we become urbanized if the whole of South Africa is not urbanized? So, also when it comes to education in South Africa, learners in all schools are expected to yield the same outcomes, even when they come from diverse backgrounds. So what we need to do is to accept that the equal treatment of learners from unequal backgrounds is actually further increasing the inequalities. So equality is not the solution. We've been doing it wrong. Equity is the solution. And equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and then allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach that equal outcome. So that's what we need to focus on. Not equality, equity. Right. So, what is this micro mobile school that Sabelo keeps talking about? So let's start with the micro school. Micro schools are a return to the one-room school building idea. And the idea behind micro schooling is to provide the same level of education in a shorter period of time. This is done by hands-on activity-based learning that often pairs expert teachers like you and me with students in the classroom. And a mobile classroom is a bus or trailer that has been converted to look like a classroom, which is cool also because it's on wheels. It goes where it's needed. It goes to the learners. So, before I go any further, technology. Before I go any further, I want to give this school a name because I want it to be personal to you, and I'm going to call it Hlanganani High School. So, we will call it Hlanganani because in isiZulu, Hlanganani means to come together, to connect and unite. So, is it even possible? Yes, it is possible. Because, believe it or not, mobile schools actually already exist. They're each uniquely designed to reach a certain outcome. So by designing this mobile school, what is it that you want to achieve, right? And we know we want to bridge those gaps. If a school costs 49 million to build, government is going to tell you, we don't have hundreds and thousands of 49 millions. So what do you need to do? You need to come up with a solution easy enough and more effective enough that is actually going to go out there and do the job that you want it to do, right? So, and if doctors and nurses can treat thousands of people in mobile clinics daily, then expert teachers like yourselves can definitely teach hundreds of learners daily at Hlanganani High School. Technology. Okay, but why this solution? Why did Sabelo suddenly wake up one day and decided, mobile schooling? Why? Well, the world is changing. And we are currently in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. Bringing high-tech mobile schools to rural communities could actually fast-track the development of rural areas and could significantly bridge that inequality gap. Most highly skilled teachers, like yourselves, shy away from teaching in rural areas, and that's a fact. Why? Because they're not just rural, they are remote. They are far from everything, right? And research has shown that most teachers, even if I do get a job, some rural school somewhere, I don't see it as a permanent position. I'm just trying to get my bread and my butter. And that is the reality with the most teachers that teach in rural schools. They just see it as a temporary employment opportunity while they go out and seek and constantly applying daily. Teaching in rural school is obviously not popular, but its lack of popularity is not affecting you. It's affecting the learners who are in desperate need of quality education. This is why I believe Hlanganani High School will be beneficial to both the teacher as well as the learners. Technology will be the driving force of Hlanganani High School, and this will allow some teachers to teach remotely, and learners will get access to quality education without having to travel long distances. And we know that learners in rural schools, they wake up at 4 a.m. just to get to school at 8 a.m. Right. So, I want to create a best of both worlds for the teacher as well as the student. The mobile classroom will transport the mobile teachers, that's you, as well as the high-end technology that the learners at Hlanganani High School will be working with. During school hours, it will be parked at the micro school building, and once learning and teaching has been concluded for the day, it will drive back to the nearest town where the mobile teachers will be staying, giving them the ability to enjoy the best of both worlds, by being able to make a significant impact in the rural community, but still being able to enjoy their towns, their cities that they love so much, right? And, you know, in cities, there's nice accommodation, you can do your shopping, la-di-la-di-la. Right. So, in closing, even after matric, we all know that many learners in rural areas do not have the necessary information about how to go about advancing their studies. All right, so you get a nice learner, they've excelled in matric, but how do I apply for a bursary? How do I apply for a scholarship, right? And that is why Hlanganani High School will not only be the source of curriculum knowledge, but also prepare learners for a life after matric, which will keep them connected to the rest of the world, regardless of their circumstances. So in summary, if done right, learners in rural areas could get access to the following, services: the expert teachers, the high quality education, 21st century skills, project-based learning, counseling for them and their parents even, career planning, sex education and drug awareness, extracurricular activity, and lastly, flexible school hours. Oh, guys. Okay, right. There it is. So in closing, I would like to leave you with a quote from Albert Einstein, which says, "Imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions." Thank you, everybody.
It was very empowering listening to all that innovation. Let's give Sabelo another round. In fact, let's give all of our speakers some more love because they're all amazing. So I believe that my job for the evening is done. But before I go, I have one more introduction to make. We are going to move into the panel discussions, and I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Wandile Nzuza and the rest of the panelists.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and my word. I simply must insist that we do give everyone here one more round of applause for that. I truly think that when we talk about the future of South Africa, it doesn't lie in the minds of some old people that we tend to see on television. Those answers are here, and we heard them today. And what we heard today was just a snapshot of what's to come. So for this evening, I have the pleasure of being the moderator for the panel discussion that we'll have surrounding these conversations, these ideas that have been placed before us. And hopefully through that, synthesize these ideas and maybe take them even further. By way of introduction, well, first and foremost, I'd just like to ask every panelist over here to introduce themselves, and then we'll get the show going, starting on the far left over there.
Hello everyone, my name is Siposetu Bridget Matomela, and I'm a year D from UCT.
Oh, joy.
I major in physical sciences and natural sciences.
Hi everyone, my name is Palesa Mlambo. I go to Wits. I'm year D. Woo, woo, woo. And my major is English.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Hi guys, my name is Atlachang Dikang and I go to UP. Text of next, text of next, text of next. I am studying in the B Drum program. That is a Bachelor of Drama, and I also plan to major.
Hi. There you go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Monaka Munyai. It has been mispronounced many times. Feel free to call me Mufasa, Munyaka. But my favorite so far has been Mukaka. Top notch. But anyways, I'm also from the school on the mountain that everyone's really excited to be. And I am, yes. And I'm a final year humanities student who is studying towards becoming an English and history teacher.
All right, thank you everyone over here. See, we still have some Varsity Cup rivalry going on over here. Sorry, Tux people, who won the Varsity Cup this year? 2 years running. Thank you very much. But unfortunately, or rather fortunately, I think if we stick to the program, we are here to discuss pressing educational challenges, and the fact that Tux is the best university in the country is not one of them today. So, without further ado, I'd just like to get us started quickly by giving a quick jog back to what we've had this evening. We had some very awesome ideas being thrown out there about what teachers should be expected to do there and in their capacity in the classroom towards dealing with resource allocation and dealing with students with special needs. Further, we had the idea of facilitating connections and the role we play as teachers in creating cyclical inequalities by perpetuating the whole dichotomy and the whole idea of a teacher's pet. So those are the first two. And I'd like to get us started off by asking the question from the panelists is, what have you found surprising thus far from all these talks, with a special emphasis on those two? What do you find surprising and in those connections, and what do you think we can make with these ideas from these talks? So in short, we have these talks that they've given us. What have you found surprising, and what do you think their significance can be? We'll start on the far left over there. If anyone here would like to butt in, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, so with all the talks that were presented today, I sort of made a connection. It was different talks obviously presented, but there's a connection of the issue of fairness, equality, equity, and I was actually taken by surprise by the last speaker, because usually we emphasize on equality, equal education, equal distribution of resources and all of that, but she mentioned something that is important that I don't think we pay attention on, which is equity, which is not really the same as equality. And equity in terms of education is mostly controlled by two factors, which is fairness and inclusiveness, and which is connected to what the first speaker presented about being inclusive in terms of disability. But I don't think inclusivity only should or focuses on that in education, but there's like exclusion in terms of our color, in terms of our financial backgrounds, in terms of our gender and religion and all of that. So it was quite surprising to see connection from the first speaker till the last speaker, and what I take home from this was the fact that we are mostly battling with the issues of justice, social justice, to put it in like summative word. It's the issue of social justice that we've been preaching for years. Even after apartheid, it's still the same issues that we are dealing with. So yeah, I made that connection that with all the speakers that we're presenting here, there's one problem that we are dealing with, and it all comes from social justice and the injustices that are within our education system. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
What was surprising for me was we understand that there's so many issues in education and schools, but some issues are overlooked, or there's this thing of some issues are better than others, or some issues take more priority over others. And what stood out for me is what Jenna was talking about in terms of special needs. When we think of issues in education and in schools, we think of issues around lack of infrastructure, books and things like that. We don't really think about special needs and those people, you know. So for me that was striking, especially when she brought up the statistics. It was very eye-opening for me, and I really appreciated that. So yeah, I think that's about it for me.
If I might actually, that mic can stay that side actually. If I might add on, Iviwe made a very good point, I think, with regards to the idea of self-identity and what the intentionality that surrounds the architecture that we enter into, and what it actually does for that place, what emotion we connect to it, and the sense of identity linked to it. And between that, it might interest you to know actually that it's exactly as you say, that we tend to overlook all the other things. I think we, as South Africans, we tend to take a very racialized view of the issues that face our education system, and we tend to stop there and never actually look further to what the special needs cases are as well. It should interest you, however, that in the Western Cape, currently as it stands, the Western Cape stands at the forefront of that. So I would actually be interested to know, of those special needs schools, how many of those 200 and odd numbers that she mentioned are actually limited to the Western Cape? You know, condemning the rest of the country to whatever devices that they left to. So thank you very much. Let's hear this side.
Hi again, everyone. So what I got from the talks that surprised me was, well, firstly, what I saw as a common thread between all the talks was this idea of inclusivity and how it speaks to the theme of connectedness and how an expert teacher, I don't think this is something that was said in the talks, but maybe early on in the day, how an expert teacher is someone who can teach all. I actually think it might have been said, or like by itself. Oh, it was said, thank you. So I'm so sorry. Okay, so she said that, Jenna said that an expert teacher is someone who can teach all, and I think that overextension and like as an expert teacher, turning yourself inside out to meet the needs of each and every student is very important. But what I found interesting and connected, it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, is when Munaka was involved in the Timong Talks debating session, where they talked about how, as someone who gives back to the community and someone who's interested in the idea of change, like, what about your life, and what about like, how do you, like, in terms of overextending yourself, like, when is it enough for you? When do you need to, you know, take care of yourself, reel yourself back in? And I think that the last speaker, Sabelo, catered to that, and was actually some of like the first solutions that I've ever heard of that, of this mobile school going to the rural communities to teach children, and then coming back to give the teacher an experience in the city life so that they can have an experience that they can take back to those students back home. And also it's not a thing of teachers taking themselves to remote environments where they are locked out of like the life that they want to live. So it's that whole idea of like, how do I give back to a community and still live and have my own life? So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Powerful. Thank you very much for that.
Hello. Okay, cool. I think the surprising connection that I made throughout all of the talks is that there's a great deal of intention in the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship. The connection between having social entrepreneurs that are making your Tlanganani high schools and your concerned expert teachers such as your Jennas and your creative teachers such as your Ashikas, right? And then finally just having the educational leaders that are able to stand up for us, such as your viewers, and, you know, essentially put forth these ideas and communicate them is surprising to me because it is so intentionally well threaded that at the end of the day, leading the forefront of educational change is a contribution that we all are obliged to make. You're not limited to starting at Hlanganani High School. You can work at a Hlanganani High School. You're not just limited to being an expert teacher that tells Brian to stop smoking weed. You could be an expert teacher that's doing evaluations and shaking the classroom up and being creative. But I think ultimately the most surprising connection that I've made today is that there's a well-intended thread in JGF and the intention that they have for us, and it's great to see it coming alive in just all of these talks, but also in all the contributions that we're going to make into the education, into the educational sector. Just like a departing thought, the surprising connection that I made today is that I'm actually very hopeful after all of those talks. The kids will be all right.
So the next thing I just do need to, and it's more of a caution and a question, is where many of us here are quite young. Many of us that are about to head into the education space, many of us are year E's, and we have been in the classroom already. And I do pick that up in actually all of the speeches that were made this evening, that there is this idea that teachers need to be at the forefront. We need to show that intentionality. In fact, there's an old framework my friend told me about. It's intentionality, practicality, and authenticity. So it's not enough to have that intent, as we heard from Doug Lemov earlier on today, but what's the practical solution, which we heard from Iviwe. We heard about the practical solution from Usabelo as well, and the authenticity that needs to go behind it. My next question, though, is this is a very big project that we're trying to take on. Inequality in a country of over possibly around 60 million people right now. Is it enough that only teachers are placed with this burden? Keeping in mind that burnout is a thing. So to what extent can we also pass this burden over to other stakeholders, such as parents, parent-teacher associations, SGPs, etc.? I welcome any contributions.
Can I hop on? Thank you. I think in terms of this one, the largest one is just accountability. If you lay the burden on teachers, we tend to forget that often when you're within a system, you tend to undermine just how much the system has an influence on you. And Tina's speech was perfect for this. A lot of us go into the education sector like really passionate to be transformative role models, expert teachers, but we tend to forget that there's a human, there's a human in us. We are human. Not a human in us. We are human, right? And that's just it. And so I would go into a classroom promising all this inclusivity and transformativeness, but as a teacher that's prone to poetry, if a kid likes poetry, I'm going to like the kid. And so that sort of like human fallibility, when it's spread across horizontally, multiple stakeholders that hold one another accountable, but at the forefront of their mind center the best holistic development and education system for a student, such as your parents, your parent-teacher associations, organizations such as the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship that want to impact education, your schooling, your schooling environments, and even your higher education sectors. When all of those stakeholders exist with the centralized development of a student in mind, and there's accountability, but more importantly, we know that collaborative effort just tends to achieve better results and accelerates the achievement of those results. So that burden is absolutely not just on us as teachers. Of course, we should take the baton and spread and pass it on forward. But I think the most important thing to understand is that if we share that responsibility and we share it enthusiastically and with passion, and we challenge one another, like Jenna so enthusiastically encouraged us to do, I think then we achieve better outcomes for everyone while still maintaining our peace.
No, I don't know what to say. But into bendiza is that we have different stakeholders that are in education, ones that are affected directly and ones that are affected indirectly. And I think the main stakeholder, the education system, the main person, the main character is steering the learners. There is the education system because of them. There are schools because of them. And then we have parents who are, you're raising your child. You want your child to be educated. You want them to succeed. And yeah. And then you have your teachers, which is us. It is very unfair. Ubana we are the only ones who should be at the forefront, because we can't do anything if the parent is not involved. Well, we can do something, but not much. We can't do much if the child, the learner itself, is not there, is not present, is not fully there to learn. So yeah, I think I fully agree with you with the issue of collaborative work and unity between teachers, learners, parents, SGB, and the government, business owners, and yeah.
And can I add also, I don't think I have a clear answer to the question, but from what I'm hearing you guys say, it's very interesting. But I also think that I don't know how we would incentivize people or other people in other sectors to care, except for the fact that you should care. Like, it shouldn't be something that people are encouraged to do. I think it's a thing of, if you care about South Africa, Africa, and the world at large, our future lies in the youth and creating a better tomorrow for them. So that's something that I think that people should fundamentally care about. And putting this burden on your shoulders as a teacher to say, as an expert teacher, to say that you want to, solve all of the youth's problem can get a bit much sometimes. And on the way here, I was talking to shout out to Kira. We talked about this idea of it's too much. You have this end, and Jeremy, I think, also said it, you have this end vision that is so massive, but you don't even know the beginning steps of getting there. What you should start with is the classroom that you're in. You see your Brian who's addicted to weed. You see your whoever's and whoever's. That's the people that you start with. It's these immediate people close to you. This whole thing of, I need to change the world can become so paralyzing. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
I'd like to highlight that as you mentioned at the beginning, and as we are seated here today as Jake's Gradwell Fellowship, we are also educational leaders, or the goal is to become educational leaders. And you highlighted a very interesting point, which is, it's a challenge. It is a massive project, and we can't put it on teachers alone, yes, but it's also difficult to now try to get everyone involved into something that ideally they should care about. If they did care about it, children wouldn't still be dying in pit toilets. All right, and I think, and I'll just touch briefly on what Doug Lemov said earlier today, which I found interesting as to what you're saying, is that's the challenge for leaders. How do we build that buy-in from other people to make sure that it becomes a society-wide project towards achieving that end of creating a true, just, and equitable society based on the opportunities we give people through education. So thank you very much for that. We come then to somewhat our last two questions here, which is, as a future teacher, as future teachers here, what connection this evening do you think is most important? Now, that's very difficult to understand because they are all important. But if we had to run towards a practical goal right now, what would you say is the most important connection you made this evening?
I think an important reflection that I've made is something that, shucks, I forgot her name. I think it's Tinya. What she said when she said it's important to be non-biased and to strive to be the type of teacher that can teach properly and adequately and without biases and without any negative influences, if I could say, not picking and choosing and pushing certain ideas, that's what I got, in your classes, but trying to be inclusive and trying to provide a holistic and quality education.
Let's take one more. I was going to piggyback off of your answer that you had earlier, and that was in terms of, I think you spoke to the notion of how you said you don't have to have this great idea. You can be a part of Sabelo's idea to go teach in mobile schools. And what I think the connection that I want to take away from here is that you have your Sabelos, you have your Jennas, you have your Tinas, you have everybody that presented today. Those are brilliant ideas. What we should do as a network of JGF members is connect with those ideas. Speak to Sabelo more, or please, because obviously she didn't have enough time to speak on her whole idea and analogy of mobile schools. Like, speak to her and find out how you can contribute to that vision of hers, because at the end of the day, we're all JGF members and it eventually becomes our success. Like, you don't have to have your own idea that, you know, you're going to do this on your own. Like, we don't exist as an island. So the most important connection that I want to make is the ones from here, the people that you interact with here.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have a round of applause for our panelists this evening? Well, I think as we end off over here, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone that had us this evening. And as a closing reflection, what they said there at the end, connect with one another. It's a long way that we're going on. And it starts with the connections that you guys make here this evening, with an eye to realize that it is a nationwide project. So go out there, build those classroom cultures, make those connections with the other people to collaborate to make this dream of ours a reality. Thank you, everyone.
Hello? All right. Yeah, Chincha Magia. You see, I have a cap on. So, apologies, we are over time. And ngiyaxolisa kakhulu, ngikupa tshwarelo. You see, I'm digging everything now. Yes!